about, I was talking to my husband about the counselor, Mrs. Joyner. I don't know if anybody remembers her. Yeah, in counseling, it was so important that your guidance counselor actually kind of identified things to you that could help you go to college.
Again, my name is Dwayne Wright. I am a native of York, 1990 graduate of York High. This afternoon we had a panel discussion presentation up at the high school where this all took place. 1968, the day after Dr. King was assassinated, they had a walkout. Now, it was sort of very fitting that the walkout that the students had at York High, March 14th, was National Walkout Day in response to the shooting down in Parkland, Florida, as well as the National March for Our Lives they had down in Washington. And I said, wow, these students, our current students at York High, are engaged. They're aware of what's going on and they're taking a stand. So I was watching some things on Facebook, and they had their march on the 14th when they walked out of school, and they had a little program out on the park, and the officer, Officer Muldrow, said, this is the first time, he was congratulating the students, this is the first time, York High students ever walked out. In my mind, I'm like, man, this guy doesn't know his history. And I said, and that sort of lit a fire in me. He said, we definitely need to bring this to the forefront. And it's 50 years, and I said, man, and I've gone, I lived in Georgia, Florida, Cleveland, West Virginia, and I'm sort of home right now. And I said I wanted to encourage the school, the city, to recognize the people who made an impact. Made an impact on me, made an impact on the school system, the city itself, and we had this little celebration this afternoon. And I talked to Brother Drayton about doing the program here for several reasons. To open up to the community, but I was telling him that many of the participants were CA kids, grew up in the CA, and the CA had an impact on their lives, taught them things, not only about themselves, about being proud of who they are, because they had some strong individuals that were leaders at the CA that influenced these folks. So I said it's sort of fitting that we sort of bring it back to the CA, where a number of these individuals sort of cut their teeth in their growing up. So I have a couple of slides I want to share with you, and then we'll have a discussion with folks here in the audience who participated, but also want to engage others who may have been from different classes, because we know that the 68 seniors were influenced by their siblings or their family members or friends from earlier classes, and they were also pushed by their underclassmen, friends and family members as well. So at this time, I would like those participants to sort of come up to the table and share some insight about what they attempted to do, what they did, and where can we sort of go from here.
Good afternoon. I'm Deborah McMillan, and these are my compatriots. I'm a 68 graduate of York High, and as you know, we went through quite a incident, and I walked in on at the time that Mr. Kirkland was speaking about it, and I thought, what an incredible memory. Unless you read the book and rehearsed it, but it was just incredible. But
Like yesterday.
like yesterday for him. For me, it was a little different. These young people, I'm going to call them young, are the young people that we shared this experience with. And as she said, she brought Miss, no, what is your last name? Woodard. Mrs. Woodard said that we went to CA way back, and we were in all of the dance classes and the kindergarten and the sort of like the day children's program, along with all those programs for little scouts, Girl Scouts, and things of that nature. And those are things that shaped us. And you know, sometimes you don't think you pay attention so much to them because those are, we didn't know, and at least I didn't know, you couldn't go to the other Girl Scouts, you know, until we were older. We just thought this was for us, so we took advantage of it, okay? But as you get in high school, and as we advanced, I remember in, let's say Hannah-Penn, does anybody remember Hannah-Penn? Well, I know being there, we started seeing a difference in how, at least I started seeing a difference in how African-American students were treated. And I started seeing that more of us as African-American students were relegated to general courses. I remember my parents went into the parent-teacher class, and they were trying to decide, or they were making preparations for us to go up to the high school. And they said, okay, you need a general class, you need a general class. You know, we were kind of relegated to general classes or either secretarial, business areas. And so my parents went in there, and I don't know what kind of fuss they raised, but I ended up being in college prep. So, but you know, there were some students, black students, who probably, their parents didn't know any difference to go up and make a fuss or an argument for placing their child in a different course. So that was one of the first times. And I didn't know it was racial or discriminatory. I thought, I was kind of embarrassed my parents were going up acting like that. Okay? But they had chosen something for me that they thought would be much more beneficial than a general course. You know, you're in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. You don't know the difference too much between a general course or college courses. But as I went into the college again, into the high school, it became very obvious that there were barriers to achieving things that you would like to achieve. And I listened to Mrs. Kirkland here still, yeah, ELS. That was my sorority as well, and only one. It's always one. You know, we were just, if there was any kind of activity that they allowed black people to be in or African Americans to be in, you were the one. And so that was a kind of interesting, but you just don't think of those kind of things all the time. At least I didn't. Think of it as being so bad. But when you look back, you can see that there could have been something more. They could have opened more. They could have helped us more. And I was talking to my husband about the counselor, Mrs. Joyner. I don't know if anybody remembers her. Yeah, in counseling, it was so important that your guidance counselor actually kind of identified things to you that could help you go to college, such as various colleges, making sure that you got information, college tours or whatever else. And so I remember after we left that auditorium, I went over to Mrs. Joyner's office and I said, I really want you to help my sister and any black student that wants to go to college. I don't want you to hide this information from them. And she looked struck, you know, like kind of surprised at me. But I don't think I don't know if she intentionally, did anything that was kind of hindering a progress for me, or whether it was just the time, because this is what was done. We weren't offered those opportunities, and people didn't feel we needed those. But just getting back to this incident where we actually had thought of actually doing anything, and then, as he said, the Black Pride Day was planned. It was going to be, but we were at actually my house trying to plan this, and over the television, I think we saw that Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and it was just hard to even, breathe. It's like you couldn't breathe, you didn't know whether to move, you were almost just terrified, basically, and I was terrified for students that had to go home, because through the streets, I wasn't sure what would happen. Would there be dogs out there? Would there be police or whatever? And so that, but at that meeting, when we heard the news, and it was just, I think, part of our, advancing maturity as students, to say we needed to do something. We could not just stand and let this be an incident where we go out and do something violent. As I guess they had talked about during the meeting, they had decided either to throw rocks as one option or pull as many fire alarms as you could. Okay, that was one of the things that we had come up with, at least I think Reggie Ellis mentioned that to me. I want him to know that. So we decided, and then we thought, somebody said that if you pull a fire alarm, there's going to be some sort of fluorescent residue on your fingers, and then police could kind of find you and take you to jail. So I decided, I'm not going to do that. But all of a sudden, but I think what happened was the teachings of Martin Luther King sort of became even more evident to us, in the need to do something that was more than just violent base. So we tried a nonviolent kind of approach, which would be, I know we started calling out all the things we demand now. We're going to have, of course we said counselors, we want black teachers, black history, we wanted, there was a report in Philadelphia that they did, my father said, concerning York City and York schools. And I don't know if it was the Rusk report or the Temple report, okay? And what they did was kind of point out areas where York could improve in terms of its diversity and helping its students and things of that nature. But it was sort of ignored, apparently. They had not really implemented any of the areas on that study. So I just stuck that in. My dad said, they should do this. So he said, just stick that in. But what happened was, after calling out all of these things that we wanted to have done, we wanted black history, of course, African American foods. And to get African American foods, we needed black cooks. So we wanted black cooks hired as well, teachers, and allowing more access to black students to various either clubs, societies, or sororities and things of that nature, so they could participate. And so we decided to go up to the school the next day to have this auditorium event where everybody was going to sing. We were going to give our demands. And I thought during the night, once they went home, and I thought about whether I could remember all the things that they had talked about at the meeting. And I just decided to write things down, just as a way, so that if we are making demands, we can at least be clarified and have at least some kind of paper to present with our demands. So that was my part of it, just writing down the thoughts of those who gathered. But they had so many participants, I was really afraid to go into the auditorium, even though we had this meeting last night, because you didn't know whether they would have police there. You didn't know if they were going to have officers come or whether there was going to be any kind of repercussion. And so I wasn't sure if they would also penalize us. This is our senior year. What could they do to us, trying to graduate? And so, but as people filed in, I don't know how many people then started feeling their spirits rise, to the point that we're going to do something, we're going to do this no matter what. And then finally, when we went over to the administration building, I think it was, to me, again, a sort of frightening walk over to administration, but probably less than a block. But, you just don't know what could happen in that time. But it was, I think, being together with all of the students who participated in it, all of the black students from every class within that school, I think together it made us become at least more brave so that we could all walk together and we all stood together. And I think that made this a momentous time. And presenting those demands, important, but you never know how things are going. We thought it would just be a piece of paper they'd look at, probably wouldn't even bother to acknowledge it. But instead, they took that paper to a school board meeting. And we thought, But, and I don't think Dr. Perry was so comfortable with us doing this at all. But sometimes things have other powers that's over them. And I think that how God has opened a door. Sometimes we think a door is closed, but it can open. And instead of calling police and dogs, he invited us to that board meeting so that we could read these demands. There wasn't always the nice words and things of that nature. We got a little criticism from some spelling, so that was my fault. But at least it was, I think it was something that they could lay their hands on and start working on one item at a time. Okay, so I feel very fortunate to be here with my student friends as we were in that time frame. It was, I don't know if this was done around other areas in the country, whether students presented demands like this. Do you know?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know.
This
I
might have
never
been the first student
looked.
protests.
Right. I heard them. We saw protests. We saw sometimes, fighting in the streets, police and dogs and fire hose and things of that nature. But I don't know if anybody or if any group actually had a list of demands that were implemented. And that's one of the things. And I think the biggest thing about this is that Martin Luther King, all of the things that he went through and that he taught, as well as he organized in various cities, I think the students, the senior high school students at York High got it. And we took that message. We didn't just hear it, we took it. And we used what we could of it, and we did what we could. Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing, Dwayne, and Dr. Kitchell was talking about the school board meeting. I don't know if you recall that school board meeting. Remember that school board meeting? Mm-hmm. We came in to read our demands, and they didn't want us to read the demands. In fact, they had a couple of board members during the time that wanted to try to shut us down. And it was the only black school board member who demanded that we have an opportunity to speak, and that was Russell Chapman. And that's how we got our demands read at the school district building.